So it's been a full month since we launched Operation Epic Fury and began the war in Iran. Today, Iran's military is heavily degraded and their leadership pretty thinned out. However, Iran is still launching missiles every day. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, and right now, additional U.S. forces are headed to the region where a ground operation seems imminent. So to help break down where things stand, we're joined today by Representative Adam Smith, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. We talk about what options are on the table going forward, how our allies are responding and contributing in this fight, and the one key Trump action that helps predict exactly what's coming next. Thank you to Sam Scanlon for helping organize this interview. Appreciate it, buddy. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Representative Smith, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to chat here a bit today. We've got a lot to run through. We hope we'd focus on the ongoing war in Iran, if that works for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the most important thing we're dealing with, of course.
So on February 28th, as the war kicked off, you issued a statement calling this a war of choice with no strategic endgame. We're 4 weeks on from that. We've seen a number of operations played out. No doubt you've seen additional and new intelligence since then. Has your opinion or perspective of this conflict changed?
No, I mean, it's played out about the way I think I expected and a lot of other people expected. And there's sort of three pieces of this to keep in mind. One is divided into two, which is the objective. And there's sort of two broad objectives that you could have for going into this war. One is to significantly degrade Iran's military capability. And that, I think, we've done. So that has been a positive. The problem is significantly degrade does not eliminate, particularly in the age of drones. And missiles are increasingly easy to build. I mean, the Houthis in Yemen, dirt poor country, running out of oil, running out of water, backwards. They're able to generate missiles that can shut down the sea lane in the Red Sea. It's apparently not that hard to build a missile or a drone. So while we've degraded Iran's capability, have we degraded it to the point where there's a strategic advantage to be gained from it? I think that's highly debatable. Iran still has the ability to threaten us, to threaten Israel, to threaten the Gulf states, to threaten the global oil supply. So what have we accomplished with that degrade mission? And that was one of the things that worried me was, Trump administration never said, okay, we're going to degrade them and this is what it's going to accomplish. They skipped that second part. Now, the second part that's sort of floated out there is that we will hit Iran hard enough that they will fundamentally change their behavior, either because A, the regime topples and a brand new group of folks come in, or B, the regime is sufficiently broken that they will change their policies. And what policies are we talking about? It really comes down to three things. There's a fourth one that people are worried about, but we never really had any particular plan for dealing with. Number one, their nuclear program. Number two, their ballistic missile program. And number three, their support for terrorist proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. We wanted all of that stopped. The fourth one is for them to stop, killing their people and brutally repressing them. We never really had much of an option for that except for the regime change piece. So how do you get them to fundamentally change their behavior? And I always question that piece. I mean, if we had a strategy that could make that happen, if you and I could wake up tomorrow and Iran was no longer supporting terrorists, abandoned their nuclear program, had abandoned their ballistic missile program, and was governing their country better, I'd be happy. I'll get to the third piece in a minute, which gives a little bit of a caveat on that. But there was never any plan to accomplish that. And I'll tell you, the reason I felt this way is this is a subject that we've been talking about for probably 15 years. 15 years through multiple different administrations as the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, I have sat through endless military briefings discussing exactly this subject. Massive frustration, Obama, Trump, Biden, Obama, with what the Iran regime was doing. So what are we going to do about it? All right, let's talk to the military. Is there an option on the table? And every time we went through it, it was clear that we didn't really have the capability militarily to fundamentally break the Iranian regime and force a change in their behavior. We could use it as a way to contain them a little bit, but there wasn't this victory option that Trump seems to think that was there. And this was pretty universal amongst the military people that I spoke to. And it's because Iran is dug in. After 47 years, this isn't just one cult of personality person at the top running it. It is layer upon layer upon layer of the Islamic Republic and, crucially, the military portion of it, the IRGC, their militias that have an iron grip on that country. And they're not going to let it go, and bombing them for a few weeks or a few months just wasn't going to change that, which brings us to number 3, and that is, what is the cost of engaging in this? Even if you had, let's say, a 20% chance that I'm wrong, that you could bomb them, you could launch this military campaign, and you could change the regime. The cost of that, first of all, placing an enormous number of U.S. service members at risk, and we've seen how 13 service members have died. And frankly, given the war that was launched and what Iran has thrown at us, we're lucky that the number is that low. Over 300 now have been wounded. Over 1,000 civilians have been killed. The tragedy of killing 150 girls at that girls' school in Tehran, with a mistaken missile strike, and then the global economy. The impact on the oil price, and Iran having such an easy ability to shut that down. We knew that was the card Iran would play. Once you said to Iran, we're coming for you, not just we're trying to back you down, but we're trying to eliminate you, they will fight like their very survival is on the line, which means they will try to drag everybody into it, which they did. So, is degrading them really going to get us to a point that makes it worth it? Do we have a plan that could actually fundamentally change the Iranian regime? And are we prepared to pay the cost? And my answers was no, no, and no. So that's why I didn't support this war before it started. And I still think at this point, our best play is to end it.
So to that end, if we were to end the war, what does some sort of responsible off-ramp look like here? Because it seems like if we just cut and run, that could be strategically very problematic for the United States long term. So what kind of off-ramp is there?
Yeah, look, no matter what we do at this point, it's all bad. Okay, I'm not going to say there's an easy way to get out of this, declare victory, and everything's fine. Having started this was the mistake. Now we are just sifting through a series of bad options. But I don't want us to buy into the sunk cost fallacy. In my opinion, we stayed in Afghanistan probably 10 years, 12 years longer than we should have because of that sunk cost fallacy, because of the belief that, well, we've gone this far, we got to keep trying. I don't think we should make that same mistake. And look, yes, if we were to say, basically what we would do is we would say, we have accomplished our objectives of significantly degrading Iran and putting Iran on notice that if they do something we don't like, we are going to smack them, and we're just going to keep doing it. All right. Now, there's flaws in that. To begin with, how much could Iran rebuild? How much could they continue to threaten? Would they really change their behavior at that point? But the biggest flaw in this, and this is the scariest thought that I've had after at breakfast with Secretary Hegseth a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the Red Sea. And I don't know if you remember Operation Rough Rider, when we bombed Yemen for 3 months, because Yemen was threatening commercial traffic in the Red Sea, and they were also threatening U.S. military ships. So we bombed them for 3.5 months, and Yemen stopped attacking ships in the Red Sea. And this is portrayed as an enormous victory. But here's the problem. Commercial traffic in the Red Sea hasn't increased hardly at all from the beginning of Rough Rider to today. And the reason for that is the commercial ships are like, okay, these are the Houthis. They're a little bit unstable. We know they have the missiles and the capability. Apparently, they've decided to stop, trying to blow us up when we go by, but we really don't want to find out. So we're going around the Cape of Good Hope. We're looking at other options. We're not going to the Red Sea just because of the threat of what the Houthis could do. And at this point, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to remove that threat as long as the Houthis are still running Yemen. Well, that's what Iran has now done with the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, they've attacked some ships, but they haven't attacked every ship. They haven't attacked most of them. But the threat that they might, these are commercial ships. They're not in a military campaign. They're not, managing risk and saying, well, there's a 90% chance it will be successful, so let's go. No, they want a 100% chance of being successful. No, nobody, puts a bunch of automobiles on the back of a car and says, we're going to take, well, I hope we make it. So that threat now hangs over us, and Trump is blustering like the classic bully who finally punched someone in the face who decided, fuck you, I'm going to punch you back. And now he's like, no, that's not the way this is supposed to work. You're supposed to just do what I tell you because I'm bigger, stronger, tougher, and meaner. Now what? Okay. What is he going to do to force Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz? I don't know if you heard, but the deadline has been moved now 10 days from now. I think it's April 5th. I forget what day it was, when he is going to rain fury down upon them if they don't, quote, open the Strait of Hormuz. Now, and an Iranian official even said this a few days ago. I said, look, we're not really the ones closing the Strait of Hormuz at this point. There's a war on in the Middle East, and commercial traffic doesn't want to go traipsing through a war. That's a little bit disingenuous because they are, in fact, targeting the Strait of Hormuz, but it's also true. I mean, as long as the war goes on, even if Iran came out tomorrow and said, we're no longer going to target ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I don't think you'd see a huge increase in traffic. So that is the trap that Donald Trump finds himself in. And now, I mean, either he's got the option that we just walked through, or he can try to escalate in some way that he thinks will break Iran and force them to make concessions on those 4 points. No nukes, no ballistic missiles, no terrorist groups, open the Strait of Hormuz. I don't see what that option is that's going to work.
Something that just came out earlier today is that our allies in the United Arab Emirates are considering participating in joint operations, a multinational task force to help open the strait. The allied side of this equation has been pretty empty. We've done a lot with Israel, and I have some questions about that operation here in a moment. But NATO doesn't seem to be very interested in getting involved here. And the Gulf states, this is really not doing a lot in terms of certainly projecting power into Iran, but even securing the strait. Are you seeing anything on your end that might suggest that there is some sort of coalition building, or we might be heading in that direction?
So many points on this one. One, first of all, our allies have been helping more than people realize. I mean, they've been helping provide force protection to some of the Gulf states. We've done overflights. We've taken a lot of our stuff out of bases that are in our allies' countries, and we're flying over them. The Gulf states have, on some occasions, already attacked Iran here and there. So there's more of that participation going on than is well understood. Second, there's not a full-scale buy-off on this because, with the exception of Israel and maybe Saudi Arabia, every other one of our partners didn't want to do this, and we're not consulted. We're not brought into this. So the bully went out and started a fight, and now he wants you to come in and get bloodied on his behalf when you told him not to start the fight in the first place. And it also doesn't help that Donald Trump is just incapable of not belittling and insulting anyone who disagrees with them. The rest of the world now is looking for options. Because even the ones, I mean, you think Keir Starmer really enjoys coming over to the White House and sucking up to this asshole? No, he doesn't. Now, he's going to do it if he has to do it in the best interest of Great Britain. But trust me, if you're in that sort of a humiliated position, and Trump loves to humiliate people, you are dreaming of the day that you can look at that bully and say, fuck you, I'm not doing this anymore. All right? And that's not good. And it's completely unnecessary to continue to belittle and insult and humiliate all these countries to drive them to want to be with somebody else. That undermines your ability to build anything, and for no good reason other than Trump's just nasty personality and his fragile ego. So that's 2. 3, let's say that they get over all of that and decide that, okay, we're in. Let's, whatever we can do to help you, the U.S., with your war with Iran. There's not a heck of a lot they can do, all right, because they face the same problems that we face that I described earlier. You can bloody Iran significantly. You can't really eliminate their capacity to close the strait, to threaten the region through missiles and drones and landmines and all kinds of different asymmetric warfare options. I mean, what is France or Great Britain or what are they going to bring to the table that's going to change that equation? And again, yeah, we could have escorts through the strait. We could monitor close by there. But it doesn't take much to get, a suicide boat through, or to get a couple mines through, or to get a drone through. And again, picture that conversation with the commercial traffic. The military going in and saying, okay, we got you. we're gonna escort you through. Here's our plans. Okay, so you're saying there's no chance that I'm going to get hit if I go through. Well, I wouldn't say no chance. It's hard to say. It's a war. We can't predict. Conversation's over. Negotiators say, okay, thanks, no thanks. Not taking that chance. And then there's the whole insurance issue, which we haven't even gotten into. No one's going to insure that ship going through there. So even if all of our allies overcome all of that and decide that they're all in, there's limited things that they can do. Now, the Gulf states, it's more interesting. Do they decide to launch a full-scale war in Iran? They're pretty close. But again, what targets are they going to hit that we couldn't hit, that we haven't already hit? So I don't know that at this point it adds a lot to our ability to ultimately break Iran and achieve those objectives that the president alludes to.
Iran has been pretty consistent in their messaging that they're going after countries that are either assisting the United States or aligned with the United States in these. And I think they've been pretty loose with those protocols at times and gone after a lot of civilian infrastructure. Is there a scenario where any one of these countries maybe brokers a one-off deal with Iran to alleviate pressure on their cities, maybe their oil infrastructure, or is that too far-fetched?
I don't think it's too far-fetched. I don't think it's likely just because such a deal would be hard to strike. Because again, certainly the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, any one of these countries would like to stop having missiles flying into their airport or a hotel from time to time. But the real get for them is to have their economy open back up. And there's no one-off deal with Iran as long as the war is still going and as long as Iran is still recalcitrant on making any sort of concessions. Even if the UAE cut a deal, if the war's still going, it limits their ability to really take advantage of that deal through commercial traffic. And also, I have not gotten a full-scale damage assessment yet, but I have heard roughly that a lot of the attacks on the energy infrastructure in the UAE and Bahrain and Qatar, it's going to take a while to fix. They're not just going to flip a switch and be ready to go back up to what they were pre-war. A lot of damage has been done that's going to take a while to repair.
To that note, on the kind of the briefings and the information you're receiving, the House Armed Service Committee chair yesterday, Mike Rogers, said we want to know more about what's going on, what the options are, and why they're being considered, and we're just not getting enough answers on those questions. You, sir, were in Congress during the buildup in Iraq and Afghanistan, so I feel like there's maybe some comparisons to be made there. How does that landscape look, the briefings, the information you're receiving with past conflicts?
Yeah, no, this administration has been less transparent and more opaque than any administration previously. Look, and that's part of it. And this drags us into the broader issue of Trump's, authoritarian attack on our representative democracy. Trump and Hegseth do not believe that the law applies to them. They do not believe that there is such a thing as a check on their power, that basically any check on their power is just blocking them from doing what they need to do, which is kind of a working definition of fascism as far as I'm concerned. But they don't believe that they should have to be responsible to Congress. Trump said it. The only check on his power is his own morality. And Hegseth is similar. Now, I will say, the House Armed Services Committee, we have bipartisan staff. Mike Rogers and I work very closely together. We have an incredibly talented staff that has worked with Pentagons and in many cases worked in Pentagons over the course of decades. And we are trying to make sure that this relationship doesn't die and to pump life back into it. Today, as a matter of fact, I've got one of their head of Leg Affairs is coming over to talk to me in a skiff to try to give me some of those answers that we're frustrated that we didn't get during the briefs a couple of days ago. So there are some within the building who don't like to see the severance that's happening between the Pentagon and Congress and oversight. But the leadership, Hegseth and Trump, they're arrogant. They don't think they have to tell us anything. And yes, back in the day, before the surge in Iraq, before Obama made his decision to do sort of his surge in Afghanistan in 2009, we had an endless series of meetings where they laid out in detail what their plans were and why they thought they would work. There was a belief in that level of transparency in all previous administrations that Trump and Hegseth don't sign up for. Now, there's bipartisan pushback. We're trying to get better. As I mentioned First time that Mike Rogers and I have sat down with Secretary Hegseth was 3 days ago now, 2 days ago actually, at breakfast. First time, I mean, a year plus into him being say, I've had terrific relationships with every Secretary of Defense before him, Republican, Democrat, didn't matter. So we're trying to break through that, but by and large, they don't believe in accountability from Congress.
You just yesterday kind of reiterated, and of course, during this conversation, reiterated your opposition to this conflict. I wonder how, it's one thing for a citizen to say, I support the troops, but I don't support the war that they're fighting. And you can hear individuals saying that, or even people in the private sector. How do you balance that as an elected representative to support our troops and the people that are out there in harm's way? Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard. And this is where my experience helps. All right. Because I was, when 9/11 happened, I was 36 years old. I'd been in Congress for 4 or 5 years, didn't know exactly how it worked. I heard a lot of these arguments. And then I went through, almost 20 years of conflict, or 20 years of conflict that flowed from that. And I heard a lot of those arguments about, if you're speaking out against the war, you're against our troops. And the people who want the war, the people who want to keep it going, they leverage those arguments. They push it as if, if you don't support them, then you don't support the people who are putting their lives on the line. That's complete bullshit. That is not the way our country works, not the way the Constitution works. I absolutely support our troops, but my thinking is the responsibility is to stop them from being sent into a war they shouldn't be sent into. I'm not trying to undermine the war in any way. All right. In fact, if you ask me, I really want to be wrong about this. I want to wake up in a week and the Iranian regime is gone and they've acquiesced on all of those. I still want that outcome. All right. But I just don't think it's likely. And there is no different. You're not supporting the troops by saying the war should end. You're not. Okay. I'm not trying to undermine them in any way. I'm just saying the war should end and shouldn't have been started in the first place. So I think we have to be careful. There's so many arguments for staying in a war that are so easy. It's like, we started it. If we get out now, we've dishonored the people who lost their lives. I mean, John Kerry, what was it, 60 years ago, 50 years ago now, came up with the famous line, how do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake? That was his line in Vietnam when he was, just the veteran who come back from the war, testified before Congress. And I think that's the question that we ought to keep front in mind, not give into the jingoistic stuff that, you have to support whatever military action your country launches or somehow you're not patriotic. That's just not the way it should work.
We just got notification yesterday. It seems like every day there's a new notification of more assets or more troops heading to the region. I think it was the Wall Street Journal said the Pentagon is considering an additional 10,000 U.S. troops that could include infantry and armored vehicles. From the outside looking in, this looks like maybe we're reacting or the original plan is not going as anticipated. You've got more insight here. Is that reading too much into this? What's going on with the additional troops constantly being sent?
No, that's common sense. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, if we had thought we were going to need them, we would have sent them there in the first place before the war started. Now, there is another part of this. The fact that Trump just sort of rushed into this without making the case to the American people or to Congress or anybody, I guess it's not inconceivable that even though this was part of the plan, he didn't think it through to make sure that they were pre-positioned. But I think it's vastly more likely that they have not been able to achieve their objectives. So they're trying to put more options on the table. Now, the real problem we have with that is, okay, so we know now there's 2 Marine expeditionary units. One, I think, is arriving as we speak or should be there in a couple of days. That's like 2,500 Marines. Another 2,500 Marines are coming from San Diego. It's going to be another 10 days or so before they get there. 2,000 paratroopers are coming from the 82nd Airborne. They can get there pretty quick. They're probably already there. And now we've got this rumor, as yet unconfirmed, that 10,000 more troops are being sent. So the big question is, what are they going to do with them? Certainly do a little quick math off the top of my head. 17,000 U.S. troops are not going to be able to take Tehran. I think we'd be pretty confident of that. So what's the plan? There's been talk about taking Karg Island, which gets into another aspect of this, which is, okay, you can escalate by sending in troops on the ground. We could also escalate by trying to more aggressively grab Iran by the throat and threaten their economy. Basically collapse the entire country by choking off their ability to export oil. That's an escalatory option. But how would the troops do that? How is putting troops on the ground in Iran going to help us? And if we're not putting them on the ground in Iran, if we're just going to have them positioned in the region, well, then they're just targets. All right. We're sending 17,000 troops over there. If you're not going to use them, these are ground forces. And that's not that I suppose they couldn't help with minor little things at the various bases that we have in the Middle East, but certainly nothing crucial. You put 17,000 troops in harm's way without a plan to use them, that's a problem too. And this is one of the big things that we have not gotten an answer for. Supposedly part of the brief I'm going to get today, I'm going to talk to Chairman Kane as well today, is to give us some sort of details on that. But thus far, and we asked this question over and over and over again at the classified brief 2 days ago, what's the plan? And the people briefing us were like, we don't know. I mean, literally. I said, well, sir, you got some options. Well, we haven't really discussed that. It's not. And we were being briefed by, the Joint Staff and by the Assistant Secretary for International Security who's overseeing this. Presumably, they would know. I even asked at one point, I said, okay, sorry, is it that you don't know, or is it that you just don't want to tell us? And he didn't really answer the question, but they sort of implied that it was that they didn't know. And that is very, very alarming.
Every day has been a flurry of information in every direction. I feel like we can just grab a date and there's a ceasefire on the way, talks are going well, and we're sending more troops, and strikes are increasing. What would you tell the average American in terms of trying to keep up with this conflict? What should they be paying attention to? What type of stuff should they be filtering out?
Well, the first thing is, Trump is unique. We've never had a president who was this disconnected from the truth. And I mean it that way. He's a liar, but that's a separate point. He's disconnected from the truth. He says things, all right? And does he believe them? Are they true? Who knows? The dude just likes to talk. And so he throws out 15 different ideas in the course of an afternoon. Many of them are contradictory. I always like the quote, and this was attributed to Jared Kushner, actually, from, I think, 10, 15 years ago now. Someone asked him about his father-in-law, and he quoted this line from Alice in Wonderland: when you don't know where you're going, you're always on the right path. And I thought that was pretty damn apt. I've never read Alice in Wonderland, so I didn't catch the reference, but I get the point. I think it's part of it. He just, all right. Personally, I'm not a fan of the chaos theory of anything, but certainly not of running our government, and certainly not of conducting a war. What I can tell you is it's really hard to read the tea leaves on Trump for that reason. The only thing I would say that has proven to be the case during this presidency, the last 14 months now, when he moves assets, he uses them. We saw it in Venezuela. We set all those folks down there and we started blowing up boats. We sent down a particular force that was designed for extraction. They went in and they grabbed Maduro. We did the buildup in Iran. We bombed. So in general, if he moves forces to a region, he winds up using them. But beyond that, there's not really a lot to look for, because Hegseth's not going to say anything. No one else is going to say anything. So I don't think we're really going to know. But the thing to be alarmed about is what I said. When he moves forces to a region, he thus far has used them.
It's a lot going on, a lot to keep up with, and I know you're busy. So Representative Smith, thank you so much for taking the time today, sir.
Thanks. I really appreciate the interview. It was very, very insightful, right questions, right policy, exactly what we need to be thinking about. It's so tough, because we're in this war and most people aren't really paying that much attention to it. It's bizarre. It's just the sort of the way our attention span has evolved and the way Trump is conducting his presidency. So I want more people to pay attention to it. And I appreciate you helping in that effort.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much to Representative Smith for taking the time to walk through all that. And thank you, the audience, for being here and for your support. You are the reason we're able to do interviews like this that I think are really helpful and really help kind of shine a light, different angles on these conflicts we try to cover. I mean, you're talking about the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee taking 30 minutes out of his day to answer questions for you in the middle of the largest war the United States has fought in 20 plus years. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. And again, that is because of you. It's because they recognize that we have an awesome audience here, right? A very smart, well-informed audience trying to keep up with current affairs, certainly when it involves the U.S. military. And to that end, I should stress that questions were not submitted, let alone vetted before this, and there was no editing or approval process after the fact. They said, here's this window. If you want to ask some questions, we set it up, did the interview, and immediately after started getting it ready to publish. So you got to see exactly what was on my mind and what I wanted to ask Representative Smith. Hopefully that reflects some of your interests and what you all were hoping to see addressed as well. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.